Hi everyone, I'm Claire Liu and I'm the CEO of Know Your Company. And today we have a super special guest with us. We have David Cancel, who is the CEO of Drift, this incredible sales conversational marketing platform that I believe has over 100,000 customers, just has seen a ton of success. And yeah, David is just a really amazing entrepreneur. Having started, I believe I was reading 5 companies before, was formerly the Chief Product Officer at HubSpot. So when it comes to talking about leadership, we are so excited to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Claire. I'm a big fan of the newsletter. Everyone here should be subscribing if they're not.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. Thank you.
All right. Well, you heard it from David. I did not pay him to say that, so do it if you were not
No.
not subscribed. Well, so
I'm
David,
also a subscriber to your app as well, and I get the water cooler every day.
awesome. Yes, love
Yep.
it. Thanks for the plug there too. So we have an online community for leaders called the Water Cooler. David, that's awesome that you're a part of it. Well, so you know the drill. You know what the question is coming up, but I'm gonna pose it your way. So the question I've been asking all these leaders lately is, what's something you wish you would have learned earlier as a leader?
So many things. I think the thing I think about the most, there's so many. The list is long. I should do a long blog post or something about this. But the biggest one I think now is that it's 99% people and 1% everything else. And what I mean by that is that I spent my first half of my career focused on everything else, which is like building the software, building, marketing, sales, this, that, all the stuff that we actually spend all our time reading and doing all day. That was like the 1% of it. And the real thing is it's 99% people, those people being inside your company and those people being your customers. And it's all that. And once you look at it from that lens, then you think, well, those problems are pretty well known. And it leads you to a whole different discovery in terms of reading, in terms of understanding about just like how to communicate and how to talk to people.
Absolutely. Was there anything across your career, like a moment you can nail down or look back to where that shift happened? Or was it sort of a gradual process?
Yeah, I think it was it was gradual in that it took a long time. I think what happened was you fail or you feel the pain. I should say you feel pain enough times that you finally like wisen up. Mother Nature's going to teach you the hard way or the easy way, and I was choosing the hard way. And where I would hit this is at a certain scaling point. There's always these magical scaling points in companies that make no sense, when you get, beyond 10 and 50 and 100 and then everything starts to break. And I just kept going back to focusing in on the stuff that I thought was important, but all the real problems and all the things stopping the company were all of these people issues inside and outside the building. They weren't the technical things. They weren't our go-to-market. They weren't the technology. They weren't the stack. They weren't any of that stuff. It was really the people.
Absolutely. So what would you say is the biggest people issue if you had to choose? Like what do you feel like is one of the most challenging? I know, like, take your pick, right?
Yeah. I think basically it's the communication. It's like, and the aspect of communication is that we don't really understand that everyone is slightly different or wildly different, and that they need to be communicated to in different ways and kind of absorb information and communication in different ways. I think we all know that, like on the surface, like everyone would say, yeah, that's obvious. That's, I know that. And then when we go and turn around and try to communicate to someone, we communicate to them in the way that we want to be communicated to, right? And so like it took me, I'd say back in 2007, 2006, I had a company called Compete, and we were just getting acquired. So I remember that was in 2007. So I remember the dates. But someone on the team, our VP of marketing at the time, and wanted everyone to take a Myers-Briggs test. And I was I was the CTO, was engineer background. I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. Like I hated it. We probably were like 150 or so people. Yeah. And I think I was number 150th to take it because I was just like silent protest. And I took it. Yeah. And now it's all I talk about is like personalities and this and that. But like it was like a discovery for me because not really in what it told me about myself, because most of us kind of know a lot of that, but the fact that everyone was so different, and just looking at them and just trying to understand them just logically of like, oh, this is why, when I say XYZ in a certain way, like they're not really getting it. Like it was just this big light bulb moment from a very simple test that anyone can take online, simple personality kind of assessment.
What are you, by the way, for the Myers-Briggs?
I am INTJ.
Ah, amazing. You know what's crazy?
I'm INTJ.
Yeah, as am I, by the way. We are like 1 or 2% of the
really?
population, right? So yes, I know. I was about to say that's super rare. No, but I find that, first of all, I think that's absolutely hilarious because I think there's a healthy natural skepticism around personality tests. And I think, we all like to think that we're special, or we all like to think that, everyone's kind of like us. It's like usually one of the two, or sometimes even a mix. So right now, I guess with your team, how do you, and as you lead Drift, remind me how many employees you are at today?
We are 130 some odd, 130-ish, yeah.
Excellent. So, 130 some people. How do you think about very, perhaps a little bit more tactically with 130 people communicating in a way where you've got 130 people who are all over that Myers-Briggs test results, right? You've got INTJs, you've got ENFPs, you've got, right? So how do you think about in your role as the CEO, 130 people, everyone needs a different communication style. What do you do in that situation?
I think, another thing I discovered over time was that the most scalable thing for, in terms of keeping all of this working as teams were scaling here and then in previous companies was actually the one-on-one. Right? The one-on-one, which, inherently seems like the least scalable thing possible and is the first thing that everyone pushes aside because they don't have time for that, was that actually the key to actually scaling teams and helping make them effective. So in that context, the one-on-ones, we use different set of personality tests, but we talk a lot about Myers-Briggs, and everyone kind of knows that and joking and, post their stuff, and everybody wants to know what they are. And then we use something called predictive index, which is another flavor in this world. And we use that in the hiring profile, but as well as post-hiring to kind of bring up these areas. And so people are using this all the time internally, even in their one-on-ones, kind of ongoing, and reminding themselves about, well, this is how we communicate to Emily, and Claire likes to be communicated this way. And so I need to tailor my approach. And so it's it's an active thing. I kind of think about most of this stuff as like English gardening. If you want an English garden, most of the work is actually the pruning and the taking care of. It's not the planting. It's not the plant selection. It's kind of this constant pruning. And the day that you stop pruning is the day that the garden is full of weeds and overrun.
Yes, I love that analogy. I also love that analogy just in the sense that it's this idea of sort of almost like micro choices and actions that actually build a successful team. Because I think what a lot of people think about leadership, at least in how our society sort of has thought of it, is it's bold action, it's big steps, it's crazy decisions and moments of crisis, and that's what defines us as leaders. And your sort of take, and what I'm inferring here, is it's the pruning. It's the small day-to-day actions. It's things you don't say and do say in those one-on-one conversations. I think that's incredibly valuable for the people listening. So I guess, go for it.
I think just to pull on that thread there, I think that I take it to the extreme. I think it's never the case. It's never the case that it's these big, bold actions. That's a Hollywood myth, right?
Yes.
If you've talked to, now I've been doing this long enough that I've known tens of thousands of entrepreneurs and leaders, that has never been the case. That is a make-believe story that we tell ourselves, and then we feel anxiety when we don't, leadership doesn't look like that, right? And it's not like that. It's really like it's a game of, I like that game of inches, right? It's just like these micro little things, and if you do them over time long enough, then you wake up one day and it's magically this great result. But it's so weird to me that that for whatever reason in leadership, and especially in this time, we think it's these big, bold actions, because it's never been the case. Like if you look at anything else in life, it's never worked that way, right? Like there is no this big bang thing, and then I'm an Olympian athlete, because I discovered some magic secret, right? It was like, starting at 5 years old and training, for 10 years, and then and this overnight success.
Absolutely. It's that athlete that stays, 30 minutes after practice, but they do
Yeah.
that every day for 12 years, right? And that's what separates, those super athletes from the rest of us. So what would you say, David, are some of maybe the other micro actions aside from communication and one-on-ones, but other small nuances that you feel like most leaders don't take the time to make time for, or they overlook? What are some things we should be considering?
Yeah, I think it's to me it all comes back to the people stuff. So it's those one-on-ones. It's the spending time in the hiring practice. Like we're 130 right now, and we are going to be around 200, add about 100 people this year by the end of this year to the team. So it'll be about 220, 230. But I'm still involved in every one of those interviews, right?
Really?
And everyone says, I'm at the end of the chain, so like it's been very well filtered by then, so I'm not taking the bulk of that, but it's 100 people that I'm going to talk to, and I find a way to make time, even if it's a 10-minute call, right, with those people, because it's a super important part of the process. And I think that's one of the first things that we're like 50 people now, I shouldn't be in the interview process. Like, no, you should be in the interview process for as long as possible. And I'm going to try to push that as far as possible. And I think that's important. My co-founder is the same. He's involved in the process. If I'm not there, he's there, or someone else on the team jumps in as well. But like, it's a super important thing. I would not give that up for anything, because that's a lot of it is that. And then a lot of it is the one-on-one. And then the other stuff takes care of itself.
Definitely. No, I think that's, I think some, CEOs that are probably running smaller companies are thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I need to be, maybe I got to involve I got to involve myself in that. No, David, what else would you say then? I mean, you said you had a big list of stuff. So other than the people or the communication issues, like anything else that, and here's the thing, I know you've sat on numerous boards, you've mentored so many entrepreneurs over the years. I mean, parting words or advice for any aspiring leader or current leader who feels like they're just struggling right now?
Yeah, I'd say we've all been there. So, one thing I would say is like, it basically, I think about this triangle, and I think like there's three things that matter when it comes to your business. Like, one is the market that you're in, two is people, three is your product or solution or your service or what have you. And I kind of, I'm most comfortable when I come from the product side of things. That's where I come from. So I kind of organize them first as like market, and then as the big gap. And then it's like team, people, and then there's like product, is third. And I always think about it in that order now. But for the first half of my career, I thought about it like most entrepreneurs do, which is the other way around, which is like, it's all about the product. It's all around the service.
Right.
Like no one ever thinks about the market, right? Like the market will will that to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, somehow. And then they kind of think about the people a little bit, but it's like and it's kind of the opposite. It's like choose, it's like big markets that are changing that allow you to re-look at them or allow you to create a niche within them. Think a lot about that. Think a lot about the team, right? Those are the two big levers. And then the product, like, I mean, we've all seen many examples, not to say that we should aim for a mediocre product, but like great markets with great teams, like there can be mediocre products or not as good a product as you can create that can own that market, because those two things are true. And for us kind of engineers or geeks or what have you, like we like to think about all the product.
Yes.
Really the people in that market that you're in. So that's my advice. Really take a look at those two things.
I love that. I think what that speaks to is, I think, our desire as entrepreneurs, as leaders, to control. So the product, we can control it. Absolutely. We can build it. We can write about it. We can design it. It's within our control. People, oh my God, no. There's no way we have control in terms of people. Market, forget about it. That is out of our control, so we don't spend the time. And I think it is.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, as humans, that's our natural tendency, is we love to create any sort of semblance of control. It's why we like to plan. I'm a big planner. And I've noticed this even in myself as a leader. It's like, Claire, you're trying to create this plan because you're trying to control for something, honestly, that you cannot control for.
Can't control.
Right. It's it's great to come up with those contingency plans. So I think I love that that share of focus and realizing that just because you can't control it doesn't mean you shouldn't be spending the time and energy to think about it.
Yep.
So thanks for that, David. One other thing that actually just came to mind, I was reading something on the Drift blog post recently. You had written a little bit about Peter Drucker, who is a seminal author on management. Love Peter Drucker. Apps, who doesn't, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that you talked about, that he talks about, that I absolutely loved, was this idea of no consensus in leadership. I thought it was really counterintuitive. Yes. So yeah, I would love to actually talk a little bit about that with some of our viewers here. Tell us a little bit about what no consensus is and what you mean by that, and why you were so passionate about this idea in leadership.
I love Peter Drucker, and we read a lot of Peter Drucker here. And, I'm about going back to the greats, and you can skip most business books today and go to Peter Drucker because they're all derivative of him.
Yep.
And that you read out there today. And so that's where I would start. But for us, like no consensus, like that idea really, started with me with kind of probably a decade ago, or a little, probably more, maybe 15 years ago. Seth Godin, who's another great writer, more on the marketing side, really wrote about like picking an edge. And what he would say is like, you got to pick an extreme, right? Like you got to pick an edge. You can't be in the middle. And then what I learned on my own after having that kind of in my mind was that in creating a company, like the worst thing that you wanted was indifference, right? That's what entrepreneurs battle in terms of creating a product.
Yes.
Is indifference, right? Like it's okay to have people love your product. That's awesome. It's also okay for people to hate your product, right? Because you can take someone who hates your product, who has an emotional connection to it, and move them closer to, you can move them to be fans. You can almost never move someone who's indifferent about something to be a fan. So anyway, I had been thinking about that for a long time. And then one of our values here, we have 8, is no consensus, right? And consensus is the norm, right? We all regress to this idea of consensus within the company of like, let's all vote for something. Let's hold hands. Let's not be offensive. Let's not pick an edge, right? Yes. And I was all about picking an edge because that's where I think the great things are created. And consensus, by definition, is like averaging down to the least offensive, the least controversial thing, which is just going to lead you into the center of indifference, right? You're just going to create something that nobody cares about, even the people that are creating it, right? And so for us, it's about picking an edge, going out there, getting a reaction from that, even if it's sometimes not the reaction that you wanted, like people don't love it, but at least you can work from that because you've actually hit on something that they are connected to.
Absolutely. No, so I find this concept so fascinating because I think a lot of, entrepreneurs would agree. And for folks who, are starting successful businesses, they reflect on their own product and they go, oh, we are doing well because we've picked an edge, right? I think the tension in this concept of no consensus happens when we think internally with our teams about collaborating and moving forward. So in so many teams and CEOs that, we've worked with, there's always this fascinating dynamic and conflict between how do you pick that edge, but at the same time, get people on your team not to kill each other and, be bitter about the fact that it's not their idea, it's not maybe their edge. So how have you... You
know how I do that?
Yeah, how do you negotiate that? And for folks who are like, but David, you can't collaborate. You actually can't how do you make decisions if you're always picking the edge? Aren't people going to get pissed off and leave? So yeah, your thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I stumbled on the answer back at Performable, which was like 2 companies ago, by accident. And the answer that we've been using since then is this idea of is to create this kind of customer-centric approach to building anything, right? And so we've taken it so far at Drift that everyone, and this is kind of daily mantra here, is that we tell everyone, including ourselves, that your idea and my idea is wrong. 100%. The only thing we know for sure is that whatever idea we have is wrong. What we need to figure out now is we need to get out in front of and work with our customers to figure out how wrong. It might be 5% off, right? It always is, right? It's never like you just create something in divine inspiration and then that's the thing and it never changes, right? There's always going to be a tweak to it. Or it could be 100% off. Right? It's usually somewhere in between those 2 extremes. So why not get out there, work with our customers from the very beginning to figure out how off we are. And what we're trying to do by doing that is to break down our kind of collective egos, our personal and collective egos, and get out there and get over this part of like, well, we can't collaborate, we can't do this stuff because we all are defaulted to say, back to what Peter Drucker would say, like the only goal of business is to serve a customer, right? We're only here to serve, right? So like, it doesn't matter what Claire's idea is or my idea or this person's idea. What matters is, what does the customer need? How do we best serve them? Absolutely. And the only one who can tell us that is that customer, not us. Absolutely. We're never the customer.
I love that approach in the, like you were saying, taking the ego, the personal and the collective ego out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that is, it's so hard. And I think it's a huge reason for why a lot of decisions or a lot of progress isn't made. I think this, helping to depersonalize any sort of potential source of conflict is huge. And then something interesting that I'd love to get your thoughts on is, one approach as well when you think about consensus and collaboration, or how do you build consensus and when there's sort of conflict, is this idea that yes, we're all trying to serve the customer, but also we can agree to move forward but not even have to agree on the same things, right? So I might move forward because I feel like, I want to give this idea a shot, and another person might move forward because, no, this is actually going to be the thing that really, helps us win as a company, whatever it is. We can move forward for different reasons, and everyone actually doesn't even have to move forward for the same reason as long as we can move forward. So just accepting that there's some plurality in that decision-making process when
100%.
When you're, when you're trying to find that edge, because I could not agree more with you, and I think it is such a hard and sort of messy thing in practice. It really is, at least from what I've observed. Yeah.
This is why it's all about 100. Back to the beginning. It's 99% people, because it's this. It's like the ego stuff is a daily battle. In terms of pruning, that's most of the pruning all day, and including myself, right? Yes. Include everyone in the company, right? No one's immune from this. And I'd say, last year, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, I sent out a letter to the team that I wrote up, like a shareholder style letter. And I look back at all the great stuff, and it was an amazing year. But I look back and say, okay, let's talk about the top 5 mistakes that I think we made as a team. And I traced back and I said, I think every single one of these mistakes, and I highlighted how, were due to ego. Every single time we made a mistake, it was due to our collective ego, right? And so what I'm trying to point out there is, like, we made these mistakes. We don't need to make these mistakes. And we didn't need to make any of the mistakes we did if we didn't let our egos get in the way.
Yes.
So, like, how do we get better so that we don't let our ego get in the way in 2018?
Absolutely. Well, I think on that note, that is like a beautiful reflection that I'm going to be taking away from this interview. That's for sure. And I think for everyone watching, there's so much wisdom that you shared, David. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much for having me, Claire. I'm a big fan. Everyone sign up for the water cooler.